The officers of the UN Aid Agency for Palestinians are damaged in an Israeli raid on a refugee camp in the West Bank.
The European Union and Japan signed a historic security and defense pact, the first agreement of its kind between the EU and an Indo-Pacific country. 5 people, including teenagers, were seriously injured in a shootout after drug-related violence broke out in Poitiers.
Flood-hit regions in Spain are bracing for more rains on Friday as authorities said hundreds of soldiers have been deployed to assist in rescue efforts. The latest comes after devastating flash floods killed at least 205 people in the nation's worst natural disaster in decades. Residents in the hardest hit eastern province of Valencia are counting their losses.
Estamos vivos los 4, pero lo hemos perdido todo. Toda la vivienda, el coche, son cosas materiales, pero todo, nuestra documentación, todo.
El ayuntamiento simplemente a las 5 de la tarde o algo así dijo que iba crecido el barranco, pero que estaba todo controlado. Estábamos tranquilos en casa, que como no pasaba nada, pues yo terminé de trabajar y estaba paseando el perro tranquilamente.
Meanwhile, flood survivors on Thursday queued for food and water in the battered town of Paiporta. The city on the southern outskirts of Valencia was devastated by a sudden wave of mud almost 2 meters high. Residents said the water came without warning on Tuesday. Authorities say they've now issued red warnings for areas in southwest Spain near the border with Portugal. Heavy rainstorms in the early hours of Friday flooded parts of the city and nearby areas.
After 4 days without airstrikes on Beirut, Israel launched multiple attacks on the capital's southern suburb, Dahia. The attack flattened dozens of buildings and caused multiple fires. The Israeli military claimed that its operation on the capital is targeting Hezbollah's military infrastructure. Hours after the attack, Hezbollah fired dozens of rockets towards northern Israel, which wounded 1 person. In recent days, Israel also intensified its attacks on the northeastern city of Baalbek and nearby villages, as well as different parts of southern Lebanon. At least 24 people were killed in Israeli airstrikes on different villages across the country's northeast, with the death toll still expected to rise as searches continue for those who may still be buried under the rubble. Meanwhile, in Gaza, the Israeli military claimed they killed Izz al-Din Qassab, who is one of the last senior Hamas officials.
The officers of the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees have been heavily damaged during an Israeli raid in a West Bank refugee camp. The official Palestinian news agency alleged Israeli military bulldozers had partially demolished the UNRWA building. However, the Israeli military denied it damaged the building in the Nur Shams refugee camp. It said militants had planted explosives nearby and set them off to attack Israeli troops and that the blast had likely damaged the building. The incident comes after Israel's parliament passed laws this week effectively banning UNRWA's operations in Israel and the Palestinian territories. Israel accuses the agency of turning a blind eye to militants among its staff, a claim UNRWA denies. The law comes into effect in 3 months.
So we say this very, very clearly. UNRWA is part of the past. It's part of the problem. UNRWA members took part in this massacre. Now it's time for the international community, first and foremost the United Nations themselves, to rethink and to do what's right in order to really be of help to Palestinians, instead of just sticking to their former ideas, which were an UNRWA which was infiltrated, taken over, and eventually massively misused by the terrorists of Hamas.
Multiple UN agencies have rallied around UNRWA, calling it the backbone of the world body's aid activities in Gaza and other Palestinian areas. UNRWA provides education, healthcare and emergency aid to millions of Palestinian refugees from the 1948 war surrounding Israel's creation. Refugee families make up the majority of Gaza's population.
The European Union and Japan signed a historic pact of security and defense. It is the first agreement of its kind between the EU and an Indo-Pacific country. During a joint statement in Tokyo with the Japanese Foreign Minister Takeshi Iwaya, EU top diplomat Josep Borrell said it is a timely step amid the growing tensions with China, North Korea, and Russia.
It's a historical and very timely step, given the situation in both of our regions. This political framework deepens our ability to tackle emerging threats together and towards a future where our values, our common values of democracy, human rights, and the rules-based international order will continue to guide our way.
The High Representative is on a tour of East Asia where he will also hold strategic conversations with South Korea to discuss the EU's increased engagement with the region. It comes as China and Russia stepped up their joint military activities and North Korea recently sent troops to help fight alongside Russia.
The Biden administration has said around 8,000 soldiers from North Korea are now in Kursk preparing to help Russia fight against Ukrainian troops. Moscow and Pyongyang have deepened military cooperation in recent months. Kyiv has long accused North Korea of supplying Russia with weapons and ammunition. And earlier this year, both countries signed a mutual defense pact.
Russia's actions with respect to the DPRK are not only dangerous, but they are antithetical to its responsibility as a permanent member of this UN Security Council. Russia's military cooperation with the DPRK violates multiple UN Security Council resolutions, which prohibit both procuring DPRK arms and providing military training.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said that while North Korean troops have been deployed to Kursk, they've not yet taken part in any hostilities.
We understand all the risks.
North Korea's move to deepen its relationship with Russia has raised concerns around the world about how that may expand the war in Ukraine. There are also questions about what new military technologies North Korea might get from Russia in exchange for the deployment.
Five people, including teenagers, were seriously injured in a shootout after drug-related violence, which involved 50 to 60 people, broke out in Place Coimbra in the western French city of Poitiers.
Ce qu'on sait ensuite, c'est qu'il y a eu cette fusillade qui a impliqué un certain nombre de personnes, mais beaucoup moins que ce que peuvent laisser entendre certains médias. Et c'était la place Coimbra, c'était une place publique, donc il y avait des gens en terrasse, il y avait des gens qui fêtaient Halloween avec la maison de quartier juste à côté.
On était dans un quartier qui était agréable. Au début, c'était bien. Moi, j'ai vu le centre commercial se construire, tout allait bien, et puis on était bien. Les enfants, tout le monde allait bien, et maintenant, ça se dégrade de plus en plus. C'est affreux.
There has been a rising concern in drug-related violence in France, particularly in cities outside of main hubs like Marseille and Paris. The city's mayor said the new episode of violence is unacceptable for the neighborhood and has promised police reinforcement.
North Korean television broadcasted footage of the country's latest giant missile test. Their state news agency claimed the missile flew thousands of kilometers into the sky and into space before falling into the sea east of the country. In recent years, North Korea has reported steady advancement in its efforts to obtain nuclear-tipped missiles. Many experts believe North Korea likely has missiles that can deliver nuclear strikes on South Korea, but is yet to possess nukes that could travel to places like mainland US.
Both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris campaigned in the western part of the U.S., crisscrossing the key swing states of Arizona and Nevada. Trump appeared with far-right media personality Tucker Carlson in Arizona and claimed to be ahead in the polls race. The Republican candidate said it was heading for great victory.
I think it'll go down as one of the greatest victories of all time. So we're gonna have an exciting time.
Trump's appearance in Glendale followed earlier stops in New Mexico and Nevada, where thousands of supporters showed up. Meanwhile, Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris took her campaign to a Las Vegas rally.
And we have work to do, but we like hard work. Hard work is good work. Hard work is joyful work. And make no mistake, we will win.
Earlier, Harris introduced Jennifer Lopez, who rallied voters in support of the U.S. vice president.
I am an actor and an entertainer, and I like Hollywood endings. I like when the good guy, or in this case, the good girl, wins.
The presidential election will be held on Tuesday, 5 November in the U.S. Already, more than 65 million people have cast their ballots in the race as of October 31.